Welcome to the Write Good Books podcast, the audio companion to WriteGoodBooks.com, with your host Jason Bougger.
I'm Jason.
And I'm Scott. And today we're going to take things on a slightly different twist. We're going to talk to Jason about his experiences as an editor for the ezine themeofabsence.com. So, Jason, what have you learned?
I have learned a lot. It's been fun. It's been around for about a year and a half. I think I'll start by talking a little bit about what the ezine is.
Oh, yeah, good idea.
Its URL is themeofabsence.com. It's a weekly ezine that publishes flash fiction or short stories up to 3,000 words in the genres. So I look for horror, sci-fi, and fantasy mostly. We're a token-paying market. $3 for flash pieces, $5 for short stories. We post the story and an interview with its author every Friday, and it's been a lot of fun. I think I'll walk through the submission process a little bit. I'm open to submissions year-round, and I get about 5 a week. Sometimes I get 1 a day, but it's enough to keep me busy, but not too busy. I accept just over 1 out of 4 at this point. I'm open to all formats, so I like humor just as much as I like slasher or deep ghost stories, hard sci-fi, or any type of fantasy. I'm not too picky about narrators either. First person, third person is all fine and welcome. I don't usually see too much humor, so it's always fun to see a silly story here and then. I think I do see too many zombie stories, I see too many post-apocalyptic stories, and I see too many stories where the main character turns out to be a ghost in the end. But that's okay. I don't usually reject for that reason alone. I think my biggest reason for rejecting is if the writing is just too weak. Passive tense, he was running, he was sleeping, he was reading. Too much of that can get on a person's nerve.
When you're talking about that, is it also what you're reading just doesn't interest you as a reader, or you think that it's not the subject area, it's the presentation? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. With flash fiction, you can read to the end, and it's so short that sometimes even if the story's kind of so-so, you'll get to a nice good punch at the end where you almost have to accept it, and then you can work with the writer to clean up the prose. Short stories I'll read till I get bored, and then I'll stop. So there's my totally subjective advice. Don't make me bored.
Well, I think that's the case in most, when you submit something. If the person reading it, who's going to approve it, isn't engaged with it, they're not going to put it out for other people to not be engaged with it. It's going to be a bad idea.
A bad one, yeah.
Wow, I was bored. Unless you get the case. Have you ever had those cases where someone has like a really nasty piece of food? It's like, here, try it. This is so awful. You've got to try it. I don't know too many writing places that have that model where, wow, this is really bad. You've got to try this.
That's a good idea for April Fool's
writing
contest. Send me your worst.
In that case, I'm writing 3. Here's another thing. And this isn't something we've talked about on microphone, but we have had discussions about this in short story and especially flash fiction, is you get many authors who have a great setup, but there's no end.
Yeah.
Are you seeing that a lot in your submissions? Or?
I did in the early days. The first probably 6 months of the site, it was only flash fiction. And I got a lot of submissions from people that didn't understand flash fiction. They sent, it was more like a piece of a chapter of a story. I like the old adage, start late, leave early, but you still need a story, and I was getting too many that just weren't even a story, it seemed like. Now I'm getting more complete stories. I suppose after the site's been around longer, maybe I'm getting better submissions, I suppose.
That could be.
One thing I like to say when you write short stories, because this is something I learned as a writer a while back. When my first year or 2 writing, I thought that's how you're supposed to write short stories. I felt like I was just writing a chapter and calling it a short story. I was almost offended when the whole idea of a plot came through to me. But it makes sense. You should have a story that begins and ends and has stuff happen in the middle.
Yeah. And by ending, this is a whole other thing that we can go into in probably another episode. But really, it's like you want a complete cycle of something. It's like they're in a position, something happens, and now they're in a different position. And then, it may not be completely wrapped up. I don't think.
Open-ended is okay. You can even leave some clues and leave it up to the reader.
Yeah, but some form of kept promise is made. You're promising something in the beginning and in the process, and there's something there that they could at least go, okay, I know something happened, I think. But again, that's a whole other episode.
Yeah, it is.
So
I do have to say, you don't want to end on a cliffhanger. A short story shouldn't be an episode of Lost.
There's 3 episodes right there.
Yeah. So I read the story. If I like it right away, I'll send an acceptance letter right away. If I don't, I'll send a rejection right away. Every now and then, I'll send a rewrite request. If I like most of the story, I want to work with the writer, and especially on flash fiction, if I like the ending and kind of want to work with the writer and get it published. When I send a rejection, I try to give a little bit of personal feedback. I know on Duotrope, we're one of the top publications for personal feedback. So there's that. And sometimes you just can't leave feedback, though, if a story is too hard to even give an impression. Okay, and then once it's accepted, I'll keep it in a queue until I have the stories for the month picked out, and then I'll kind of schedule them, have some variety over the month.
Okay, so you've got your 4, maybe 5 picked out. Then what? What do you do next with these stories?
Well, I like pretty websites, so I try to find pretty pictures.
That's pretty interesting.
That could be a whole nother story, but right now there's an artist out of Canada named Betty Rocksteady who has volunteered to illustrate one story a month, so I send them to her. She picks one out. I really like her art, BettyRocksteady.com if you want to check it out. The remaining stories, I go to Creative Commons for royalty-free pictures and try to pick something appropriate. Every now and then I'll send a few to the author and let them pick one too if I have trouble deciding.
So it's sort of like an internet version of cover art.
Yeah, in a way.
For your book. Okay.
And yeah, I like thinking of it that way. That's pretty good. I also, one thing that separates us from other ezines is that we do an interview with every author except for Scott.
Yeah. I have to be the rebel.
I think there's only been 2 or 3 that didn't do the interview, so I just had to give you some crap. But we do 10 questions with the author. I like to promote their work that way too. We can give them a bio, let them plug some of their other short stories or novels if they have them out there, or websites. And it's a lot of fun. I've met a lot of other writers doing this. I've learned a lot.
Got a question for you with that. Geographically, I mean, it's all the internet. It can be from anywhere. What kind of distribution do you have for your authors?
That's what's cool, and that I never would have predicted. I think half of our authors are overseas. Maybe not half, maybe 40%. But we get a lot from Canada. We get quite a few from England and a lot from Australia.
Really?
I had no idea there's writers in Australia.
Well, of course there's writers in Australia.
There's people, so I guess there should be writers. Which is fun because Australia is an awesome place to visit. The cool thing about that is just, how do you describe it? It's really cool to get the point of view from other writers because you don't usually go looking for short stories from overseas to read. And here they're coming to my inbox every week. And it's just really interesting. Another thing I really enjoy, I'll draw out a disclaimer. I look at the author's bios. That doesn't affect whether I accept or reject a story. But I love looking at their websites and seeing what their background is. If they've got some other novels, if they've got other short stories, I'll read some of their samples and check out their blog. It's just a lot of fun. I've also got submissions from other writers that I've been published in other anthologies with. So that's you got a little bit of team building going on, I suppose.
So you've received the submissions from all over. You've accepted or had the author rewrite. You've got cover art. Now it's starting to sound like a rock album. Cover art. Then what?
Then what?
Then what? Step 3, profit?
Step 3, profit. I wish. Click on the ads. No, I do some minor revisions. Mostly, it's the formatting to make it more web friendly, readable. I'll throw in a few more paragraph breaks, and I'll mess with some punctuation a bit. I generally don't change the content at all. If I find errors, I fix them, obviously. But if I want to change any content, I'll usually let the author know that before I approve or accept the story. So I'll send it as a rewrite request. There's been a couple others where I change it after the fact, but I let them approve before I publish it. The publishing process, I try to get ahead of schedule because everybody's busy. We're all busy, so sometimes I'll take a weekend and try to get 3 or 4 of them cleaned up and just schedule so they just post. And then I go, whatever platform I have, I print them there. I'll Twitter, Facebook, and Google+, LinkedIn, Pinterest.
MySpace?
All the fun stuff. No MySpace yet. Let me find my time machine. I've got a few other goals for this site, and I'm talking probably like 5-year goals, because it's growing, but it's growing slowly. Right now we're token, which I think is great. There's a place for token markets. They give new writers a place to get published. I've had probably 2/3 of the short stories I've had published have been in token markets, so they're a great place for new writers to get published. I'd like to take Theme of Absence to where I could get enough ad revenue to get it at the point where it is semi-pro paying, which is 1 cent per word.
And just, we'll explain token and semi-pro and pro markets in a future episode.
Yes. Another goal I have for the site, I'd like to start finding some readers and maybe doing an audio version of all the stories. I would also like to find more artists and get original art every week. I do also have a goal in the next 5 years of collecting some of these stories in anthologies and self-publishing them as anthologies probably on Kindle. That's all years down the line. It's just been a great experience. It's been a lot of fun so far.
So now it's time for the punchline here. What have you learned as a writer by being an editor?
I have learned a lot, and that was actually my motive of setting this site up when I first started it. I wanted to see if it would help me as a writer. Biggest thing I learned as a writer was to find mistakes in my own writing. I can tell, and I hate to say this, but a lot of stories I can tell in the first sentence, if not in the first paragraph, if I'm going to accept or reject it.
That early?
That early, and I never believed it when other editors have said that. I thought, well, no, you can't tell that much from their first sentence, but you really can. If you see a story open with passive tense, that's going to be prevalent throughout the whole story, and I just don't like that style.
So what you're saying is you have a particular style or voice, not like super narrow, but you are looking for particular presentation for the stories for your site.
I am. What's funny about that, you can tell that voice in the first sentence. So as a writer, I can find that in my own writing now. And I can also find, when you're reading these short stories as an editor, you're really looking for continuity errors, you're really looking for grammar errors, you're really looking for head hopping or whatever kind of errors. I don't know how to describe it exactly, but then I can go back to my own fiction and read it in the same way I would read the short stories for Theme of Absence. And those errors, it's almost like they're highlighted. They just jump out at me now where I used to not even notice them.
Well, oftentimes as writers, we are concerned with character and plot movement and things of that nature. The very creative part of what we do. But an editor, that's the technical part of what we do. The grammar, does this make sense, the continuities. And so it's. I imagine you do some editing, and then it's like, okay, my editor switch is on now, so that's how I'm seeing the world. And then you go back to your own writing and edit like crazy, right?
Edit like crazy. And I think that's why a lot of people outsource their editing. Get the professionals to do it. Because I know I'm not the best editor in the world, and it's embarrassing in some ways, but also enlightening. I've had a few authors come back to me after I published their stories on Theme of Absence and say, it looks like we both missed this typo here. And they're like, oh yeah, thanks for letting me know. I fix it right away, but that's the beauty of publishing in ezine.
You get lots of beta readers.
Yeah, lots of beta readers. It's traffic. I might as well talk about its traffic. I'd say it's not, it's not a huge market yet. Every Friday, a new writer gets typically 100 to 200 unique visits. New story every Friday, and then throughout the week, anywhere from 20 to 100. It just kind of depends on the author and how much they promote it. Most of that traffic comes from their Facebook accounts.
Really?
Which is kind of surprising.
I don't know. As much as people hate on Facebook, that's where everyone is. People almost feel forced to be on Facebook.
Yeah, we'll have to do an episode about Facebook.
A social media thing, yeah. But yeah, that's cool and you can track kind of where the traffic's coming from, and you see that, that's what that social media aspect really does point people to an artist's or a writer's content.
It does. And there's other joys to doing it. I love when I get, I'll send an acceptance to a first-time writer and just see how happy they are about getting their first acceptance. It always makes me feel, hey, I'm giving something back. I remember how happy I was when I got my first acceptance, and it's always fun to give that to somebody.
Well, and then even when you give the rejection, you're giving input, whereas a lot of them will get this form letter. We received your submission. No.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe it's a little bit better worded than that, but
even my form letters are kind, at least. But it's fun. Check out the site. It's www.themeofabsence.com. It's linked to from writegoodbooks.com. And I think we're out of time for this episode, so check back next time. Thanks for listening. Check us out on the web at www.writegoodbooks.com. If you have any comments, leave one on the blog post. Thanks.
See ya.